Floyd was an African-American man born in 1973 in Fayetteville, North Carolina, but grew up in Houston, Texas. He was the first of his siblings to go to college. In 2014, he moved to Minneapolis. He had three children, the youngest was 6 in 2020, and two grandchildren. He died in May 2020. Family history: his great-great-grandfather Hilary Thomas Stewart, born as a slave, acquired his freedom during the Civil War. He faced racism after he lost his 500 acres of land to white farmers who used legally questionable maneuvers. 25 of May 2020, in Minneapolis, George Floyd went to the store but was accused by a store employee of paying with a fake $20 bill. The employee called 911. Two police officers showed up and found George Floyd in a car. One of the officers, Thomas Lane, as he approached the car, pulled out his gun. It was never explained why he felt the need to pull out his gun. Once outside, Mr. Floyd fell, laying down on the ground with handcuffs. At this moment, people started to record the scene on their phones. George Floyd appeared to be in a distressed state. It's at this moment that Derek Chauvin, a white police officer, arrived. He placed his knee between George Floyd's head and neck. Floyd said more than 20 times that he couldn't breathe. He was pleading for his mother and begging, "Please, please. Can't believe this man. Mom, love you, love you. Tell my kids I love them. I'm dead." He then said, "You're going to kill me, man." 9 minutes after, George Floyd was dead. The videos taken by people on the scene were shared widely on social media. Protests spread to other cities in the US and in the world, the UK, France, Australia. Protesters chanting, "I can't breathe." The police station in Minneapolis, where the officers involved in George Floyd's arrest were based, is set on fire. On May 26, protests began in Minneapolis. May 29, Derek Chauvin is charged with murder and manslaughter. May 31, violence spreads across the US on the sixth night of protests. More than 75 cities have seen protests. At least 4,400 people have been arrested. Curfews are imposed across the US to try to stem the unrest. An international human rights movement, the #Black Lives Matter movement is at the heart of the protests over the killing of George Floyd by the police, but the movement was created in 2013 after the death of Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old African-American who was shot and killed by George Zimmerman while Martin was unarmed in his dad's neighborhood. The #Black Lives Matter was created after Zimmerman was acquitted of the murder. The movement gained further momentum after the death of Eric Garner in New York, who died on the 17th of July 2014 after an NYPD officer put him in a chokehold. Garner repeated the phrase "I can't breathe" 11 times. The first street protests, organized by Black Lives Matter, took place in Ferguson, Missouri, after the shooting on 9 August 2014 of Michael Brown by a white police officer. It has since been a movement across the US in response to racism and violence suffered by Black people, particularly at the hands of the police. Countries across the globe had some of the largest Black Lives Matter protests in their history, all inspired by the video of Floyd's brutal death in police custody on May 25, 2020. Black activists saw Floyd's death as a symbol of the intolerance and injustice they face. George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis in May 2020 sparked the largest racial justice protests in the United States since the Civil Rights Movement. George Floyd's death proved once again that police brutality is still happening, especially for people of color. His death had an impact on society and history in the US by initiating the largest racial justice protests since the Civil Rights Movement, by showing that systematic racism is still here. But it also had an impact worldwide, with Black Lives Matter protests happening in other countries where they had their own George Floyd story.